It's a joy to have the whole world connected here today. So I'm going to begin, and little by little, everyone will be, I think most of our waiting room is in here now. So that's wonderful. We'll give this an official kickoff then. Welcome to our December webinar, everyone. Um, I hope your Advent is off to a good start. And it's really this time of hopeful waiting and certainty of God's love as Christmas draws near. Again, it's always a gift to be together with this global community as we continue ahead on our journey toward integral ecology. So if you can, please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your location, and maybe one way you try to get closer to God during Advent. My name is John Mandel, and it's my pleasure to greet you from the United States on behalf of the entire team around the world that's working for the Laudato Si action platform. The platform is a project of the Vatican's Dicastery for promoting integral human development, with the Laudato Si movement as its global operational partner. Inspired by Pope Francis's encyclical letter, Laudato Si, on care for our common home, our participants undergo a journey of ecological conversion through a process of reflecting on their own and their organization's relationship to God's creation, assessing their ecological impact, and discerning concrete steps to live in better harmony with nature and at the service of those around us. We come from the most varied sectors. All of you joined here are part of these sectors: families and individuals, schools and universities, parishes and dioceses, religious congregations, healthcare institutions, businesses, and other organizations. And we work towards specific Laudato Si goals. Laudato Si means praise be to you, Lord, as St. Francis said in his canticle, In Admiration of Creation. As we hear the stories shared in today's webinar, maybe we too can repeat, praise be to you, Lord, for the gift of the world around us, for the awe we have at God's incarnation through Jesus, and for the inventive ways our speakers stay connected with the Lord while also caring for creation as we prepare to celebrate Christ's birth. In fact, Pope Francis in Laudato Si writes, "The Lord, in culmination of the mystery of the Incarnation, chose to reach our intimate depths through a fragment of matter. He comes not from above, but from within. He comes that we might find him in this world of ours." So thank you, all of you, for joining us today to hear about lighting the way to Christmas with Laudato Si, hearing our speakers talk about ways Christ wants to lift us up from within our humanity and amid the ecological and social challenges we're facing today. They'll share how they've brought more sustainable practices into their Advent activities and how that has kept them centered on the true meaning of Christmas and deepened their preparation for the encounter with Christ within, with others, and in creation. So just a few announcements before we begin. First, if you need translation, we're offering translations in Spanish, Italian, French, and Portuguese. You can access them through the Interpretations button at the bottom of your screen. Click the Interpretations button and then choose your language. For our English speakers, there will be one presentation in Portuguese, and so we will ask you at that moment to go to the English channel under the Interpretations button. The celebration is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. You will be able to watch the recording afterwards on our Laudato Si Action Platform YouTube channel, where you'll also see the slides and the speaker information. Then this is a way to build up our global community, and we ask that your comments in the chat be positive and respectful. If you'd like to look at our netiquette guidelines, which you agreed to in your registration, you can find them at the link in the chat. Then if you have any questions during the webinar, please submit them by clicking the Q&A button anytime. Any question that's put into the regular chat may get lost, so please use the Q&A button and we'll answer as many as we can. There will be a community meeting immediately following the celebration, so if you didn't register yet, you can still do that at the link that will be now in the chat. As a reminder, it's a separate Zoom call and you'll need a different link to connect, so make sure to register to continue our discussion there. Soon we'll have a moment of prayer and then a greeting from the director of the Laudato Si Action Platform, John Mandel, who's calling live from the Vatican today. And then Brother Alberto Parise, also in Rome, will explore how the spirit of Advent and ecological conversion can inspire our preparations for Christmas. And then we have Sister Gelda Zorzo, who's calling from Brazil, who will be telling us about an ecological nativity scene initiative promoted by her congregation. So in just a minute, we'll have a video prayer prepared for us by Emanuela Chiang, who's currently in Kigali, Rwanda. Emanuela has worked for the International Voluntary Service for Development for the last 24 years as desk officer for Middle East and Mediterranean countries, Horn of Africa, migration, and integral ecology. For the last 3 years, she has served as the point person for integral ecology for the Salesians of Don Bosco, and among other tasks is also a Laudato Si animator. So to prepare for this moment of prayer, let's take a moment to remember that we're not only connected virtually, but are each in a physical place too. We can close our eyes for a second, take a deep breath, and feel that air go into our lungs, and notice how it leaves again. Let's notice where we are in contact with our seat, and feel our feet touching the same Mother Earth beneath us, connecting us to one another. What brought us here today? What do we want from this moment? Let's listen to Emanuela's video now.
In the coming weeks, we want to prepare ourselves for a time of true celebration, respectful of the whole creation. In this Advent, a precious time of preparation to Christmas, we want to pause for a few minutes, breathe, contemplate, and meditate on the profound significance of the coming of Jesus, Son of God, to the earth. Jesus, through whom the universe was created, enters into a human body and sets his feet in creation. Jesus, you who breathed our very air, help us to understand how precious it is, to conserve it and preserve it from air pollution. Come, come, Emmanuel. Jesus, thou who hast drunk our very water, help us to understand how precious it is, to conserve it and preserve it from water pollution. Come, come, Emmanuel. Jesus, you who walked under the same sun that shines on us every day, make us respect the rhythm of seasons and of nature. Come, come, Emmanuel. Jesus, you who lit the fire for heating and cooking, help us to use the natural resources in the most just and correct way. Come, come, Emmanuel. Put out the fires of war. Let us pray for peace. Come, come, Emmanuel. Let's stop running after crazy spending on gifts and give our time and our smiles to those in need. Come, come, Emmanuel.
Thank you, Emanuela, for preparing that beautiful prayer for us. It always moves me to hear that song, O Come, Emmanuel, and also just to remember why we're here getting ready for Christmas. So thank you. Now I'd like to introduce the director of the Laudato Si Action Platform, John Mandel, who's working from the Vatican this week and connecting from there. He'll speak now. So please, we pass the mic to you.
Hello, everyone. Good day. And as Sarah said, I'm here at the Vatican, and I was lucky enough to be able to greet Pope Francis in the last couple of days, and he gave a very big thumbs up to the Laudato Si Action platform. So I'm sending a hug from him to all of you because I received a beautiful greeting and support. So it's so good to be together again as we reflect a bit and reset our focus during this Advent and upcoming Christmas season. How are we going to be different than we were last year? How are we going to act differently? Because that's what the platform is really all about, acting differently, living differently. We've had a bit of darkness this year, perhaps failures in ourselves or in those we hope to join us on our journey. Perhaps because of our lack of progress on our personal Laudato Si goals and those of our families or institutions, or the lack of any noticeable change on how we in the church are living sustainable on a daily basis. Recalling my Advents of the past, I can still hear the solemn sound of the oboe that was played in the music group I was part of at the university when I was a student. It was a somber sounding, even haunting sound, yet evocative of hopeful possibilities. And there are memories in my own family, my wife and I, when our children were young, we had an Advent wreath that we would light at mealtime, turning out the lights, sometimes holding hands and singing that familiar antiphon you just heard, O come, Emmanuel. You know the words, right? So our children would often argue about who would get to light the candles or who would start the song. Yes, it was cold and dark that time of year, but somehow our family got it, that special feeling of a sacred time of preparation. Shall come to thee, O Israel. This year, at least for me, feels a little darker and gloomier than usual. Perhaps the outlook has been temporarily dimmed with the changing political situation and any hopes of progress. And yet, I'm also reminded of that great song from the musical Godspell taken from Matthew's Gospel, based on the prophet Isaiah's command. You've heard it, haven't you? I'm gonna try to do this, see if I can actually play a little bit. That's right. Prepare ye the way of the Lord. Prepare ye the way of the Lord. How are we going to do that? How are we going to be that preparation? Well, the gospel says, make straight his paths. How are we to prepare this highway for our God during Advent and Christmas? Perhaps by clearing this junk of consumerism out of the roadway and beginning to set a new tone and a new atmosphere. Can we begin to imagine a planet in the kind of shape that it is in? And when the Lord comes, is it really ready for him? Are we ready for him? Have we cleared the way for the Lord? I think what gives me hope the most, and I have to say this before, and I've said this before, is this family that we have gathered around our common home table. In a way, these last few years, we've reached out beyond ourselves and grasped the hands around us, feeling that human touch, that warmth, that light within the space between us, that Emmanuel, and the feeling that we are not alone. And for me, that promise that Jesus made resounds in my heart as well. Wherever two or more are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. In the midst, Emmanuel, God with us. Well, there are now more than two or three. There are 10,000 individuals, families, and organizations in our midst. 3 years ago, there were 0. This pilgrimage we are on needs more light as we find our way, and these temporary moments when we are a bit lost and can't find our way pass when we give each other the light of Christ, the light that burns within the space between us. So Let's come together today again and overcome the darkness with the light that cannot be extinguished. And let's set out once again on the journey of ecological conversion. This town that we're about to enter is called Christmas. So let's bring our lanterns, build our campfires. Let's take turns lighting the Advent wreath at our common home table so that our own witness and God's present among us will continue to inspire those around us. And the authentic Christmas joy that we feel will radiate out, not because of the presents we give, but because of the presence, his presence that we bring with us. So now let's enjoy some time together, some experiences and ideas that will inspire us to have a different kind of Christmas.
Thank you. Thanks for that encouragement to keep this light of hope lit among us and continue to spread that light to others. And all the best for the rest of your meetings there at the Vatican. Now we would like to go in more depth on how ecological conversion and Advent can prepare us for Christmas. And we'll invite Brother Alberto Parise to speak. Brother Alberto is in Italy, is from the Comboni Missionaries of the Heart of Jesus, and currently serves as the congregation's JPIC coordinator and member of the General Secretariat of Mission. He is also a member of the platform's Religious Sector Working Group. Brother Alberto, Pope Francis just released his latest encyclical on the love of Jesus' Sacred Heart, which I imagine is a big joy for your congregation. He wrote about how this human and divine love meets the deepest needs of our world today. Can you say more to us about that connection between ecological conversion and the preparing for the birth of Jesus at Christmas and in our hearts?
Thank you, Sarah. I'm trying to share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I would like to start my sharing looking at reality. Just a few weeks ago, we have heard the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor at the UN Climate Conference, COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. The year 2024, sorry, the slide is not, yes, sorry. The year 2024 is the hottest year ever recorded, poised to become the first year in which global average temperature has always exceeded 1.5 degrees Celsius. As we know, that is the threshold that the Paris Agreement, signed the same year as of the publication of the encyclical Laudato Si, wished never to cross. We see clearly the implications of such increase in temperature, ever more frequent and violent extreme weather events, disruption of ecosystems, loss of biodiversity. In Baku, the voices of indigenous peoples, local communities, and civil society organizations cried out to the impact of climate change on the poor, the marginalized, the excluded. They voiced the cry of climate justice amidst the indifference, the geopolitical power games, and the brazen backtracking on commitments made in recent years. And they also denounced the connection between wars and climate change. In 2023, global military expenditure reached approximately $2.44 trillion, marking a significant increase driven largely by geopolitical tensions, including the ongoing war in Ukraine. This figure, $2.44 trillion, dwarfs the funding committed to international climate finance, which remains far below the $100 billion per year set by developed nations under the Paris Agreement. And by the way, the goal of $100 billion per year was set as a symbolic figure. In fact, one of the main goals of the conference in Baku was to agree on a new goal for climate finance based on needs estimated by scientific means. The actual costs of climate change in developing countries that contributed the least to creating the problem is estimated at around $5 trillion a year for making a transition to renewable energy systems, adapting their economies to climate change, and recuperate from loss and damage incurred because of climate change. Developing countries lobbied in Baku for a minimum of $1.3 trillion a year, and the final decision arrived at just $300 billion as from 2035. An added problem is that for the most part, it is about loans, which would increase the debt crisis of developing countries. But there is another subtle critical aspect, namely the so-called carbon budget. Scientists calculated how much of carbon emissions can go into the atmosphere before reaching a point of no return below 1.5 degrees C. At the current rate of about plus 40 gigatons of CO2 equivalent per year, scientists predicted that we would reach that point in 2030. Instead, it is apparent that reality is moving much faster towards that threshold. One of the reasons may well be that emissions due to military activities are not counted in their predictive models. Imagine how much carbon is released into the atmosphere, not only for fueling military planes, tanks, and ships, but also because of explosions, fires, and destruction. Definitely, peace, fraternity, and care of our common home are different sides of the same coin. All is connected. As Laudato Si states, we are faced not with two separate crises, one environmental and the other social, but rather with one complex crisis, which is both social and environmental. And strategies for a solution demand an integrated approach to combating poverty, restoring dignity to the excluded, and at the same time, protecting nature. Most importantly, the elephant in the room of climate negotiations is the fact that the root cause of the climate crisis is an unjust economic financial system, which makes inequalities grow ever more through debt and exclusion. Pope Francis denounced that in his apostolic exhortation, The Joy of the Gospel, in which he wrote, and I quote, Such an economy kills. So Advent. Advent is a time of active wait, a time of conversion in preparation for the coming of the reign of God in the person of Jesus. It is like a gestation prefiguring a new heaven and a new earth, hidden in the mystery of incarnation. And this year, it is pregnant with a special meaning, since it introduces a Jubilee year. The Jubilee tradition is about social justice and prophecy, namely a critique of unjust socioeconomic systems and of their ideologies. In particular, the Jubilee tradition calls for the forgiveness of debts, the restitution of the land to the impoverished ones who were forced to alienate it despite being the basis of their identity, their livelihood, and equality. And very meaningfully, in today's reality, slowing down production and consumption to allow for the regeneration of exploited workers and of creation. Indeed, the Jubilee calls first and foremost to a change of heart, to overcome the culture of indifference, the throwaway culture, the culture of self-interest. But the litmus test of such conversion is a systemic change from a society of accumulation and consumption to a society of sharing and care, and from a society of domination and exclusion to a society of service and inclusion. A commitment to systemic change requires more than an individual commitment. There is a need for a collective advocacy effort to bring about structural transformation. That is why this Advent season, we are called to prepare for the coming of Jesus in our life and society in concrete ways that respond to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor from a systemic perspective. I would like to point out some practical ways in which we could do that. First point, supporting the campaign for a treaty of non-proliferation of fossil fuels. Fossil fuels account for over 80% of global carbon emissions. Many governments are still approving new coal, oil, and gas projects, while global subsidies to fossil fuels have surged to $7 trillion a year, threatening our chances of limiting warming to 1.5 degrees C. It's crystal clear. We need a concrete binding plan to end the expansion of new coal, oil, and gas projects and manage a global transition away from fossil fuels. To protect people from the threat fossil fuels pose to our climate, our health, and our future, a growing bloc of 14 countries are seeking a negotiating mandate for a fossil fuel treaty. the proposed treaty would complement the Paris Agreement by providing the global roadmap needed to halt the expansion of fossil fuel, manage an equitable phase out of coal, oil, and gas, and lay the foundations for a true, just energy transition in which no worker, community, or country is left behind. The second point is a campaign for debt cancellation. Pope Francis asks affluent nations to acknowledge the gravity of so many of their past decisions and determine to forgive debts of countries that will never be able to repay them. And this is in the bull of indiction of the Jubilee year, spes non confundit. More than a question of generosity, continues Pope Francis, this is a matter of justice. It is made all the more serious today by a new form of injustice which we increasingly recognized, namely that a true ecological debt exists, particularly between global north and south, connected to commercial imbalances with effects on the environment and the disproportionate use of natural resources by certain countries over long periods of time. And Pope Francis quotes this in Spes non confundit, and quoting again Laudato Si, number 51. So Pope Francis concludes by stating that if we really wish to prepare a path to peace in our world, we must commit ourselves to remedying the remote causes of injustice, settling unjust and unpayable debts, and feeding the hungry. And this leads to the third proposal, from military expenditure to a global fund to end hunger. In fact, in Spes non confundit, Pope Francis underscores that hunger is a scandal, an open wound on the body of our humanity, and it summons all of us to an examination of conscience. Therefore, he renews his appeal that with the money spent on weapons and other military expenditures, let us establish a global fund that can finally put an end to hunger and favor development in the most impoverished countries, so that their citizens will not resort to violent or illusory situations or have to leave their countries in order to seek a more dignified life. Let us take courage and start this Advent season with a solid commitment to an authentic social transformation.
Thank you, Brother Alberto. That was really such a great way to think about Advent in this on a larger scale, right? That it's our personal lives, but how are we also living as brothers and sisters all over the world, um, with that courage to not only try to reduce our personal use of fossil fuels, but are we in contact with the organizations in our areas and our representatives to continue to be a voice for these topics and needs? So thank you very much. Yeah. So who would have thought that maybe writing your representative might be a way of preparing for Christmas, right? Preparing for Jesus in our neighbors all over the world. So to take that to another more specific example, I'm going to introduce our next speaker who's going to be speaking in Portuguese. So a heads up to our English speakers, you'll be moving to the English interpretations channel as soon as I finish speaking. So I'm introducing Sister Zelma Zorzo, who's from the Daughters of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, connected today from Maceió, Brazil. We're so glad she's here. Sister Zelma is an educator in the area of Bible information and has worked in education and information for religious life. She's the general animator for her congregation and is currently the community animator at Coração de Jesus Recanto in Maceió. Since we're talking about preparation for Christmas, we contacted Sister to speak about a special ecological Christmas celebration event that took place there. So our English speakers can now move over to our English interpretations channel. And Irma Gelda, bem-vinda. So if we're just getting her connected now, so we can listen to her in Portuguese. She might be having a little trouble connecting. Let's see here. She's muted. Oh, there, I see her. ¿No escuchamos? Let's see. I don't know if we are able to, we can't turn on.
Sim,
Sí,
sim.
muito bem. Sí.
Então, bom dia. Apresentando a nossa experiência de Natal ecológico neste espaço do Recanto Coração de Jesus, que é um evento realizado a cada final de ano aqui na área verde do Recanto Coração de Jesus, situado na cidade de Maceió, estado de Alagoas, no Brasil. Este espaço pertence à congregação das Irmãs Filhas do Coração de Jesus, fundada por Santa Teresa Verzeri. A ideia do Natal Ecológico surgiu num encontro de partilha e reflexão da comunidade religiosa com o nosso pároco, o Senhor José Augusto, no mesmo ano em que Papa Francisco presenteou a Igreja e a humanidade com a encíclica Laudato Si. Então, foi em 2015 a primeira edição do evento, sempre na semana entre Natal e 1º de ano. Então, é um evento em parceria com as irmãs, as religiosas do Recanto Coração de Jesus, Filhas do Coração de Jesus, com a paróquia Santa Teresinha. O evento foi interrompido em 2020 pela pandemia, mas neste ano, 2024, realizar-se-á no dia 28 de dezembro a 9ª edição. O espaço onde se realiza o evento do Natal Ecológico teve a alegria de ser beneficiado pela mini bolsa, uma parceria da UISG, a União dos Superiores, a União Internacional das Superioras Gerais, com o movimento Laudato Si. Recebemos essa bolsa, mini bolsa, em 2022. O objetivo do Natal Ecológico é a evangelização e conscientização ecológica através da beleza dos cantos e músicas, das mensagens, luzes e encenações. É aberto ao público em geral e os que participam do evento são convidados a oferecer alimento não perecível destinado a famílias e instituições que dele necessitam. E as ornamentações do evento são realizadas, são feitas de materiais condenados ao lixo, como é o caso das garrafas PET, dos CDs, não mais em uso. E para evitar também que este evento aumente o lixo, os descartáveis, um copo preparado para o evento, onde os que desejam um lanche, um suco, refrigerante, é servido neste copo lembrança que as pessoas podem levar consigo depois. E Laudato Si tem sido, desde o início, então, justamente 2015, tem sido o motor do evento Laudato Si, né? Não só como apoio, não só como incentivo, mas como contínuo apelo à conversão, à nossa fé cristã. E especialmente nas primeiras edições, foi e continua sendo o número 217, especialmente para a equipe de preparação, a equipe de organização, é aqui o número que tem ajudado muito na nossa conscientização, na nossa conversão e mudanças de atitudes. Temos de reconhecer também que alguns cristãos, até comprometidos e piedosos, frequentemente se burlam das preocupações pelo meio ambiente. Outros são passivos, não se decidem a mudar seus hábitos e tornam-se incoerentes. Falta-lhes, pois, uma conversão ecológica, que comporta deixar emergir nas relações com o mundo que os rodeia todas as consequências do encontro com Jesus. Viver a vocação de guardiões da obra de Deus não é algo opcional, nem um aspecto secundário da experiência cristã, mas parte essencial de uma existência virtuosa. E nesse espírito, então, apresentamos alguns flashes dessas edições. O tempo não permite apresentar mais, mas alguns flashes dessas edições de Natal Ecológico de 2015 até 2023. E no final, então, o card anunciando o evento deste ano com o tema Orar, Esperançar e Agir com a Criação, retirado este tema do ano da oração em preparação ao jubileu e do tema que foi do tempo da criação neste ano de 2024. Seguem então os flashes num vídeo. Obrigada. Maureen, quem apresenta?
Obrigada.
Maureen, apresenta. Faltou o vídeo.
Sim.
Sim.
É o slide 9, justo.
Quando, porém, chegou a plenitude dos tempos, Deus enviou o seu Filho.
Eu sou o anjo Gabriel, veio em nome do Senhor, darás a luz ao Salvador.
Senhor.
Celebrar o Bom Natal é ir ao presépio e contemplar o menino Deus, nascido de novo, onde nascem e crescem, sofrem, morrem, vivem, sobrevivem, choram, gritam, cantam, rezam, lamentam, trabalham, lutam, os mais pobres deste mundo. Mas tudo está interligado.
Obrigada, irmã Gelda, e a todos aí.
Graças, graças. Obrigada. Obrigada
Muito,
pela oportunidade.
muito linda.
Um bom Natal.
Bon Natal. Merry Christmas to
Obrigada.
her. Yes,
Thank you. Thank you.
thank you. It's very inspiring to see what a local community can do to come together to live this a moment of ecological conversion, even in our preparations for Christmas and Advent. And it's been beautiful. We have this full range that we've heard today between the global issues and how we're really called to not hide in our own local reality, but also have the whole world at heart where we can. Um, and that this ecological work is not an option for us as Christians. It's really essential to living our vocation, the invitation that we have to care for our brothers and sisters. And I think an essential way that we help to continue to bring the presence of Christ in the world and allow him to be expressed in the beauty of creation and in these essential parts of what we need to take care of one another. So, and then all the way to these local efforts that I'm sure many of us will be participating in these weeks to come as we near Christmas. We are now going to reach our conclusion. Thank you for our speakers for all that you shared. It would be great to continue this conversation. And so I invite everyone to join us at the community meeting that's coming immediately after this webinar. We'll start 5 minutes after the end of the webinar. And you can register for that again at the link that's being put in the chat right now. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you to our team that's behind the scenes, our translators and our tech team. You help make this possible. Don't forget to update your Laudato Si action plans, submit your new ones for this year to come. And if you haven't registered yet for the platform, join us at www.laudatosiactionplatform.org. We wish you a very happy Advent and a Merry Christmas, and have a new year full of this peace and joy that's built on real action and love for those around us. So thank you everyone for joining. And we'll make sure to look out for an email coming up. We don't have the exact dates yet of our 2025 webinars, but we're working on that, and we'd love to stay in touch. So look out in your emails for future news. Bye, everyone.